Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, are we just going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again? This is stupid, man. It's so dumb. Yes, we are going to do the same thing over and over again. Okay, I'm not going to stop. Do you understand that? Never going to stop this week. Do you have any idea how much crap I've accumulated to make fun of this stupid team? I have 16 different notes on the Bears firing their offensive coordinator, 14 on Caleb Williams, 9 in a folder just called The Bears Suck, 4 on receipts, 2 on Nate Davis, 2 on brand new stadium plans. We got work to do, folks. Before we get to that, though, we actually do have a little bit of Packers news, not a ton, but it's Wednesday, so we finally got to hear from the coach and got to see the practices and the injuries and all that good stuff. So we'll start not with the Packers. Did you see this? Russell Okung took half his salary in Bitcoin in 2020. He took that $6.5 million and turned it into $45 million by doing that. I have asked 1,000 people to explain to me what Bitcoin is, and I don't understand it. I've used the robot, and I've said, please explain it to me like I'm a 4-year-old child, and it does, and I don't get it. The only thing I know about Bitcoin is that I love to go back and look at the very beginning and just imagine, had I bought myself a single coin. In fact, if I could go back in time, what I would do is spend all my money at the beginning, and then, there's like peaks and valleys. Go to that peak, sell, wait till the valley, buy back in, you know what I mean? Then I did that with how much money I estimated I would have had at the time. I'm at about $1 million right now. And I had no money at the time. I think it would have been maybe $1,000 investment. I'm not saying go get Bitcoin. I'm absolutely not saying that. But this is the second time now I've looked at Bitcoin because there's been an explosion in the price. And just thought, man, I'm stupid. You know that? Anyways, I've been wanting to clear that out of my roster for a while. Might as well talk about it. Match and I have been posted this on X, and I thought it was interesting observation that definitely needs to be talked about. He showed the top 7 NFC teams, and it's the 8-1 Lions, 7-2 Eagles, 6-4 Falcons and Cardinals, 7-2 Vikings, 7-3 Washington Commanders, and 6-3 Green Bay Packers. And he just put, 9-8 ain't making it in the playoffs this year. And it got me thinking, so you almost certainly need 10 wins to get into the playoffs. 9 is not going to cut it this year. What are the odds you need 11? Probably not very good, but that would be kind of crazy. I mean, some of these teams are getting to 11 for sure. Lions need 3 more wins. Philly needs 4 more wins. After that, actually, Minnesota and Washington just need 4 more also. Gets a little bit dicey beyond that with the 6-win teams, Atlanta, Arizona, Green Bay. It's not impossible, though. Could you imagine that? There have been a lot of years where people have been super ticked off because there's these 8-win or even the 7-win teams are getting to this, this playoff structure is stupid, they don't belong in there. This would be like the exact opposite. It would be the most dominant NFC group ever. And, of course, the AFC frickin' Chiefs would end up winning the Super Bowl anyways. But I thought that was interesting. Did you find that interesting? I don't know. I can't get any feedback from you people, or I don't know what you want from me. Fine, screw you. How about this? It's official via Ari Mirov. Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott will undergo season-ending hamstring surgery. Owner Jerry Jones announces on W. There's no frickin' W there. 105.3 The Fan. In my head, it's just automatic W. In this case, it's giant fat L. That wasn't funny. Man, the downfall of this team, and it makes it so much worse because, again, like Dallas always in the offseason is just sitting around going, I don't want to pay these people, but I can't not. I don't know what to do. And they were hemming and hawing with Dak. The season ended and they freaking hated Dak, and the owner, Jerry Jones, I don't think he cares for Dak all that much, but it's like, well, we got to do it. Fine, we'll pay Dak. And of course they paid him, and he's not playing well, and the team is freaking terrible. And now he's out for the rest of the season, and Jerry Jones has got to just be like, well, that's it, dude. Again, I hate to, every time I talk about Jerry Jones getting morbid and talking about his lifespan, but you got to get to a point where you realize we went all in with the express purpose of I'd like to get another Super Bowl while I'm still here, and we just freaking bottomed out. And I don't know where we go from here. Figure we should spend a few minutes talking about the Jets, because that's a funny situation. You remember the Jets, that's the team that was going to show how incompetent the Packers were and how stupid they were and how they got raked over the coals and they got worked by a better GM and a better organization with a quarterback that's been let down by a terrible franchise and a terrible organization, and all these people are going to go there and, man, they're just going to dunk in our faces. You remember that organization, don't you? Here's a note. Dov Kleiman. He's kind of a not super reliable source, but in this case, I don't care. Since firing Robert Saleh, the Jets' defense has allowed the highest EPA per play of any team in the NFL. Saleh wasn't the problem, ... Not only was he not the problem, he was... Look, again, I was not a huge fan of Saleh as a leader, as a head coach, but my goodness, the guy probably built the best defense in the NFL in his time there. We've already talked about that. Over his span, depending on the metric, I think it might have been EPA, I don't know. But during his span with the Jets, they were the number one defense over that time period. It was the only thing that was working. The offense is falling apart, but the defense is keeping you in it. You're a week away from getting Devontae. Top freaking comment here from Not Serious Sports. Firing the defensive-minded head coach because the offense struggles will lead to a bad defense and still bad offense. The fact that even needs to be typed out. I mean, you almost want to punch this guy in the face just for typing something that's so obvious it's stupid. But at the same time, an organization, which is a collective of people, came together and decided that's exactly what they should do. Devontae, who's made a bunch of great life decisions, decided he was going to ghost the Packers. They offered him a ton of money. He's like, nah, screw you guys. I'm not going to do it because Jordan Love's not going to be very good. And I'm going to go out with my buddy, and we're going to tear things out with the Raiders. And then he obviously didn't look at the contract that was given to his buddy, because as soon as I looked at it, I said, this guy's getting cut next year. This is the worst contract I've ever seen in my life. There's zero guarantees in this contract. I think it was actually structured to where like the money that he got in his first year was the exact total of his guarantees. It was just a big giant red sign that said, we don't want him and we're cutting him next year, but we're going to give him this contract this year so that we can get you here. Anyways, after that, he says, you know what, I'm going to go join up with Rodgers now because they got a great defense, and Rodgers is the GOAT, and we're going to go get a Super Bowl out there. Anyways, now that we're caught up in that situation, Connor Hughes of the Jets, whoever he works for, Devontae Adams said the Jets lacked energy against the Cardinals. I asked how that can happen considering how small the margin of error is to make the playoffs, a run. He said, I don't know. So I don't think the Jets have fully given up the way the Chicago Bears have, but it's getting ugly. Devontae Adams has been there for like 2 weeks, and he's already like, this is stupid. I don't want to be here. And that brings us to this, which this is not an endorsement, okay, me playing this, but like a lot of things, whether I agree or disagree with what's being said, the fact that it's being said is the beautiful part of it.
This was the Green Bay issue. Everybody was walking on eggshells. It is now the New York issue. You're watching Kyler Murray look like a different sport against him. You've watched Bo Nix beat him. You watch Mahomes, Lamar, Herbert. If you're the Jets, is it under consideration? You move off him.
So I don't think it's under consideration. I think it's the only possible option. By the way,
that's stupid, but continue.
He will be, after this season, he will be a 41-year-old quarterback that is coming off the 3 worst seasons of his career. Call it 2 if we're not going to count the year he lost the Achilles, fine. The year in Green Bay was terrible, a lost season due to injury, this disaster. He is the worst leader in all of sports. He is only, best I can tell, somewhat interested in football, and only if he can play with his old friends and family. He is, there would be no reason whatsoever to bring him back. And if you're, listen, Jet fans think I've been hating on them all year. I've just been impeccably accurate every step of the way all year, which sounds like hating when you're a train wreck team and franchise. But I have some good news.
By the way, that's my same philosophy when it comes to the Bears. It sounds like I'm a Bears hater. No, I just tell the truth, and the Bears suck. That's just the reality.
Listen, one of the knock-on effects of last Tuesday's election is Woody Johnson is about to get another cushy post overseas. So the Jets have an opportunity to go from Woody to Christopher Johnson, so you move out, at least temporarily, arguably the worst owner in the league. Move on from Aaron, totally new coaching staff, totally new front office, and say we have Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, who needs to play better, Garrett Wilson, Quincy Williams to build around, and we're going to draft a quarterback. That's what they need to do. It's the only option that makes sense.
All right, that's enough of that. First of all, the conversation is kind of stupid because this was never like a long-term plan. It's not like this is a 10-year plan. It was always just going to be, I don't know, 1, 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. I don't know, probably not. That's all it was ever going to be. So I'm not saying you're done after this year necessarily. He said he's made a comment that he'd like to be back, and obviously there's some serious contract stuff going on with the Jets right now, where they are in cap hell with Aaron Rodgers, and they're stuck with the guy. And I mean, if you thought the Jets were stupid before and the Packers fleeced them, wait until you see their contract situation next year when they're not able to move off them even if they wanted to. But the idea that, and I don't think this is what Colin Cowherd was even talking about, but Nick Wright just jumps in and he's like, yeah, I think you have to move off of him in the next couple of years. Like, yeah, stupid, but that's not the question. I do think the question was even dumber, though. Do you move off of him? As in, like, before he wants to go? I don't know, dude. Look, this was a stupid decision. Everybody recognizes it was stupid, including Rodgers. Rodgers didn't think it would be stupid. He thought it would be good. He wanted to show the Packers, right? He was super pissed off because he heard that they were going to trade him, so that motivated him, and that's why he went to training camp, and that's why he actually hung out with the young guys. He was going to show everybody. Then he got hurt. Next year he comes back. He's like, screw that. I put on the show last year. I'm not doing that again. Team sucks. Culture sucks. Coach sucks, but it's far from the biggest issue. They fire the head coach. Defense goes to hell. Do nothing really to fix the offense except get Rodgers another one of his friends. That didn't work. I'll be honest, even I thought that there was going to be some positive movement there with Devontae. It just felt impossible that, as bad as the offense had been, Rodgers force-feeding Devontae at least has some value. Even that's not working right now. So Rodgers is still trying to do the I think we have a lot in front of us routine, which, you literally don't. You have nothing. You have... I don't know. You have opponents. You have losses lined up. Couple wins mixed in, granted, maybe. We're going to have a really interesting situation where we watch to see how bad your record is and then speculate in the offseason how likely it is that the Jets draft a quarterback and further speculate the fact or comment on the fact that that would actually be the right decision because, as Nick Wright said, the smart thing to do is to take your young core and build on it, which is what they should have done to begin with, but they're too stupid. They have a young core. They're like, let's just go all in with Rodgers. Well, now you waste your time with your young core. They start to age a little bit. This was a traumatizing experience for them. Garrett Wilson is never going to recover from this. And seriously, how old is Garrett Wilson going to be by the time we get the new quarterback up and running? If we assume Rodgers plays this year and next year, and maybe let's say not the next year, so 2026 will be by the time you get your new quarterback. Let's say year 2 is at best when he's ready. You could get lucky year 1, but let's just say year 2. So 2027. How old is Garrett Wilson in 2027 and that quote-unquote young core that you're talking about? How old are all those guys in 2027? They're pushing 30. They're getting up there, 27, 28? I don't know, not going to look, but the whole thing is a disaster. It's completely stupid. And it's amazing to me that they have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, and you know that they're not doing anything for the next several years. They're just not. They're going to be a bad football team until they once again tear it down and rebuild, which is going to be a little while before they can do that. I'll tell you what, let's take a break here, and then we'll get into NFC North news. Got a little bit of Lions and Vikings news before we get back to making fun of the Bears. So we will get to that. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. So the big news right now for the Minnesota Vikings is that J.J. McCarthy has undergone a second knee surgery. A lot of people are pretty panicked about this. I've had several people reach out, including the resident Vikings fan that hangs out with us, Peter with a D, so you know he's like a legit Nordic Vikings fan. But the panic is coming from, doesn't this sound a lot like David Bakhtiari? Now, I will admit to you now, Peter, if you're listening, I ran to the robot because I don't know. I asked about some of the terminology that was used, and I just asked straight up, like, you know, here's the situation as best as we understand it. Does this remind you of David Bakhtiari? And the robot more or less said no. Now, I'm guessing it's not a good thing. So to be clear, what had happened is he had a knee surgery to repair his torn ACL, which sidelined him for the year. They noticed some swelling during rehab, and they decided to get out in front of that and addressed it promptly with a second knee surgery. They also apparently had some kind of a procedure, including a biologic injection, which is aimed at promoting healing. Importantly, this development hasn't altered his expected recovery timeline. That's one of the main things that I think the robot kind of keyed in on is the fact that the timeline didn't shift. So they don't feel as though this is a real serious issue. The other big thing that kept being brought up is the difference between David Bakhtiari and this, and the first one was the recurring knee injuries, the fact that there have been several. But, you know, I kind of argued saying, well, I mean, you can't get to several without getting to the second one, right? I mean, you can't get to the third and the fourth before the second one. But the biggest thing is this happened right away, right? And the fact is swelling during rehab is not uncommon, and they decided that, you know, it was kind of a decision to get out in front of this, as opposed to David Bakhtiari, where they did a surgery, they thought everything was fine, and then the knee kept not only swelling, but filling up with lots of fluid to the point where they had to actually drain his knee. And so they had to go back and say, okay, we don't have a choice. Like, this is not healing, and so we need to go back and fix that. I'm not saying that it wouldn't have gotten to that point with J.J. McCarthy. We don't know. And maybe that's the larger point here, is that we don't actually know what's going to happen with J.J. McCarthy's knee because they didn't just let it go with the swelling. You know, maybe it would have been one of those deals. And maybe it still will. But it's certainly not the same level of concern, especially, you know, you're talking about a much older player, a guy that had a more extensive knee issue, a guy that is much heavier, you know, as an offensive lineman compared to a quarterback. And so essentially all we really know about right now is that he had swelling, and the swelling is normal, and this is how they decided to handle it. Now, I can't imagine a second surgery is super normal, but I suppose when you're a quarterback and your franchise's future is on the line, you go to 10, you know, like, we're not taking any chances. And again, I don't know, and I understand that there's panic, and I mean, amongst Vikings fans, not so much Packer fans. I guess I would just, if you were asking me, I would not take it to that point yet. There's no reason to, and again, the timeline apparently has not shifted. He's still expected to be back roughly around the same time. So this isn't like they're starting over because it failed, it was botched or whatever. It's not that kind of a thing. It was a second procedure, and I don't necessarily even know what it was all encompassed in that procedure. I'm sure it wasn't completely carving up his knee like last time. In fact, I'm really struggling to understand the terminology of surgery because I just don't understand it. So this is Kevin Seifert of ESPN. He says, Vikings rookie quarterback J.J. McCarthy underwent a second surgery earlier this week on his right knee as he continues to recover from a torn meniscus, a source confirmed Tuesday to ESPN. Sources described this week's procedure as a biologic injection intended to address swelling in the knee. Is it a surgery or is it an injection? I don't understand. I mean, do you have to like cut it open and like very surgically inject into very specific areas? Or are you just calling an injection a surgery for some stupid reason? I have no idea. But I'm not seeing any clarification anywhere. They are calling it a surgery, but the only information on the quote-unquote surgery is that they did a biologic injection. Looking into it, it sounds like it is just an injection. It is guided by ultrasound, typically, so, you know, which makes sense. You don't need to cut somebody's knee open to be able to see what you're doing on the inside. They have much more advanced techniques than that these days. Described as a minimally invasive procedure. So I don't know. I don't know why we're calling it a surgery. Maybe there was something else that happened on top of that. I have no idea. Oh, here we go. 1 hour ago, J.J. McCarthy did not have knee surgery this week. I don't know. Whatever. The guy's freaking fine, okay? He's fine. Stupid crap. As for the Lions, of course, Trevor Lawrence is once again going to be out. So Trevor Lawrence plays the Packers. He plays a very good game against the Packers, and then he goes ahead and gets injured against the Vikings and against the Lions. I'm sure he'll be back and raring to go right after that because, that's just how things are going right now. The stars are aligned just perfectly to annoy me because I want so desperately for someone to expose these frauds, and it's just not happening. It's just not happening, and it's annoying me. So the Lions are like 12.5-point favorites. I'm not even going to bet against that. That's probably about right. Like I said, they couldn't even score anything against the Vikings. They had like 3 interceptions and scored 7 points or whatever nonsense. They couldn't do anything against the Vikings. So why would I think they're going to do anything against the Lions? They're not. They're going to get blown out. In fact, I'm more inclined to bet on the Lions. Drive me nuts, man. Furthermore, Sam Laporta looks like he's got a good chance of being able to play in this game. They called it day-to-day, which is usually a good sign. But even if he can't, again, you're going up against the Trevor Lawrence-less Jaguars. They're going to smoke them, and then he'll be healthy for the next week. So, stupid Lions, man. But speaking of injury report, Packers had some really good news this week. First of all, quarterback Jordan Love was a full participant with his groin injury, so we won't have to argue on Packernet After Dark about how much practicing he got in. We won't have to worry about it because pending another injury, he is a full participant, which is obviously fantastic news. The only guy that did not participate was Colby Wooden, who has a shoulder injury. Everybody else was on the field. Jair Alexander's on the field. He was limited with a knee injury, but he's out there. Kenny Clark, limited with a toe injury. Kingsley Enagbare was a full participant. Josh Jacobs, limited. Marshawn Lloyd was out there, which is super cool. He is not officially on the roster, if I'm not mistaken, but his 21 days to return clock has started. Like I said before, when they initiate that, he'll be back, and probably soon. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the roster already. And the way things are going, every time I say something, I go check online, and like, oh yeah, that happened an hour ago. I can't do the podcast and watch the news every second, all right? Give me some slack here. It's a problem with doing the podcast like during prime time. Josh Myers also out there. He's got his wrist injury, but he was out there practicing in limited fashion. And Evan Williams is back to practice, hamstring injury limited. So all very, 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 very good news. The Bears, who did not just come off a bye week, are not in as good of a situation. Amagaji, their rookie tackle, has a calf injury, didn't practice. Jaquan Brisker, concussion, didn't practice. Tevin Jenkins, who is constantly hurt, has an ankle injury, didn't practice. Travarius Moore, DB, concussion, didn't practice. Montez Sweat, ankle injury, didn't practice. I mean, those are huge, huge, huge names. Even if I've argued that they're not as good as people like Jaquan Brisker, it doesn't matter. It's massive to have all these guys not practice. In addition, Braxton Jones, offensive tackle, is limited with a knee injury. Noah Sewell, linebacker, limited with a knee injury. Darrell Taylor, defensive end, limited with a knee injury. And Darnell Wright, second-year offensive right tackle, limited with a knee injury. Amagaji, with his calf strain, he was out prior to Week 9 in practice. He hasn't been able to practice since. I don't know his status necessarily. Jaquan Brisker has already been ruled out. So, a lot of these are bad. To not have Sweat, Moore, Jenkins, Brisker, and Amagaji, to have none of them even practice is not great. But to have Jaquan Brisker already ruled out, pretty much before the injury report even came out, is not great. But Brisker's concussion goes all the way back to Week 5 against the Carolina Panthers. He's been in concussion protocol since then and has obviously missed multiple games. Must be pretty serious. Again, not only to be out that long with a concussion issue, but to immediately just be ruled out like, yeah, he ain't going to be ready. Tevin Jenkins' injury is recent. That was against the Arizona Cardinals. That's when he got his ankle injury. Tarvarius Moore got concussed Week 8 against the Jaguars. He's been in concussion protocol ever since. And Montez Sweat is also a new injury. That was Week 9 against Arizona. Also ankle injury for him. So we'll see what happens. I mean, even if they play, you got to feel, like I said, we're not even discussing the possibility of a loss here. So it doesn't matter. We're feeling great. But to be in this state of absolute dismay and despair that the Bears are already in, having just fired your offensive coordinator, there's rumors that players within the team asked for the team to bench the starting quarterback, the rookie quarterback. I don't know if we even got to that yet, but there's plenty of that to come. I mean, these are bad. Then you're talking about a starting safety who's been out for a while, but starting safety, a starting offensive lineman, your starting number one, quote-unquote, star pass rusher who's doing a decent job in Montez Sweat. That's a big deal. That is a really big deal. And real quick, I mean, I guess we're already getting started with how pathetic the Bears are. Haven't talked about this in a while. You might recall the debacle that has been this organization trying to find a site. And I have to assume this is ownership that's primarily responsible. I don't think the president would be tasked with this, but maybe. I think there has been some talk about him taking the lead on this, which is hilarious. This has been an absolute debacle. They got into a fight with Chicago, said, screw you, we're going somewhere else. They purchased the land. There's another episode where I did the full math on it. It's absolutely appalling. They purchased the land, and then that fell through because they got into a fight with that city. And so then they said, screw it, we're going to go back to Chicago. And the governor of Illinois said, by the way, you're getting no state money for this. And the Bears are like, what the heck? And so now, apparently, even though they had this beautiful plan, I'm a sucker for new stadiums. I don't like the Bears, but I don't care. I saw the stadium plans and I'm like, this is super cool. The stadium out on the lake and everything, it looked amazing. Apparently now they're looking for a little bit of a cheaper option and are considering the Michael Reese hospital site. You might also remember part of the issue with the lakefront. So first of all, they got these lakefront plans, which they had, and then they abandoned, and then they bought new property, and then they just decided to light that money on fire, and then go back to the lake, and then they realized not only did they not have money, but a lot of people were essentially protesting them. There were advocacy groups, such as the Friends of the Parks organization, that's dedicated to preserving public parklands, objected to the use of lakefront property for private development, arguing that such a project could limit public access and compromise. So it's a freaking debacle. And so what did they say? Oh, I know. We got a new plan. So now we're going to pay somebody to come up with a new plan, even though we built two different plans already. Now we're going to have a third plan for this area. And the explanations are hilarious. Here are the benefits of the Michael Reese Hospital. Developing the area may necessitate less taxpayer money compared to lakefront proposal. Why? Cheaper area. We're not on the lake. It's not going to cost as much. Revitalization opportunities, my favorite one. The site has been vacant since the hospital's closure in 2008, presenting a chance to rejuvenate the Bronzeville community. In other words, they are no longer looking at, I shouldn't say they're no longer, they're looking at another alternative to this beautiful lakefront property. We're talking just gorgeous, pristine views on one side looking out over the lake, on the other side looking back into the city. They showed how you could be sitting there and you're looking out, because I think it's one of those where they kind of build down in, so you're in a bowl. I'm not sure, but you look out, I just remember, and you see the skyline. It just looks amazing with the city. I'm not even a city person, but I could respect how beautiful it was. And you're the Chicago Bears. You should want to really represent Chicago. And what you've decided to do, because you're not going to get any money anymore from the government, is to move into the slums. There is a vacant area. Why has it been vacant? Do you know how hard it is to have a vacant area in a massive city since 2008? You know how long 2008 is? To have not a single business say, I would love to build a business in the middle of this community. 2008, we're talking, 15 years ago? Not a single person has said, I know, I'll put a business here. And sure enough, looking into it, sounds like a slum. I mean, the robot tries to make it sound all pretty and everything. You know, it's an area going through revitalization. The bottom line is, you look at the crime stats, it is a hellhole. It's a hellhole. Compared to Chicago, the crime rates are significantly higher. Compared to other, like Chicago as a whole and other parts of Chicago, it's a very dangerous area. It's a very run-down area. Median household income in the area is 40 grand. Think about that. How expensive is it to live in Chicago? And people in the area are making 40 grand a year. So I just want to paint that picture. The Chicago Bears are such a piece of crap organization that they have gone from, we are going to build, as this powerhouse franchise, we are going to build this just massive, beautiful stadium in one of the more beautiful, picturesque, wealthy parts of Chicago, right on the lakefront, looking into the city skyline to represent the Chicago Bears, and are now saying, maybe we need to look for more economic options. Maybe we move into the freaking slums of Chicago. I mean, who knows? Maybe it'll be fine. I'm looking at it right now on Google Maps. And granted, I mean, if you go across the train tracks and this area over here full of, trucks and whatnot, and another street, and then the park, and then you can get to the lake. And then to the west of it, you've got these really tall apartment buildings. So that's nice. But I mean, who cares? I mean, Soldier Field right now, it's in the middle of a beautiful park with, water and boats. And you've got the Field Museum straight across the street. And it's just beautiful, picturesque trees and all that. I mean, who needs that? Just move south a little bit. Head over to this little vacant lot next to the train tracks and between the train tracks and the apartment buildings. Be great. It'd be perfectly fine. That's what everybody obviously would want to do to have a really great stadium. Just whatever, man. Anyways, other Bears news. They released Nate Davis, which has been another, I mean, every single thing about the Bears is just a hilarious storyline. The stadium thing is a hilarious story. Everything that they do is just funny. They went out and got Nate Davis. That was another one I argue with Bears fans about, because they got rid of a guy who was terrible and they brought in Nate Davis. I thought it was going to be great. And I'm like, he's not that good, I'm telling you. Look at PFF and some of the stats and some of the grades and whatnot. He's not better than the guy that you're getting rid of. And they thought that was impossible because, granted, the guy they were getting rid of, I forget his name, but he was god-awful. Nate Davis wasn't better. But hilariously, he famously basically never showed up. He didn't go, he never went to Chicago. He showed up like for game day and is constantly missing and is just never there and hasn't been a good football player. And they're like, all right, you know what? I think this experiment is done. So there's some Bears fan accounts pretty hilariously saying, thank you for everything you did for us, Nate Davis, and putting together these little montages. And it's just like a picture of Nate Davis, and then it fades away and just says, the end. Like that, he did nothing. Like it was the biggest nothing signing ever. All right. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a break. I don't know how. We'll have to pick something to go through here. We'll talk about the offensive coordinator getting fired and maybe empty that bucket, because that is a hilarious situation. We'll be right back. So before we get into the official details of it, I want to play this for you. I don't know. Let's see. It says Kevin Fishbane, I believe is his name. Yeah, Kevin Fishbane, senior writer for The Athletic, covering the Chicago Bears. He wants to give a little bit of a recent history, at least since the current de facto owner took over, of how things got to this point and how things have gone since he got in there. It's truly remarkable. Here you go.
You guys want the brief history lesson?
Yes, please.
George McCaskey takes over as chairman in 2011. 2012, you have a new GM in Phil Emery. Well, Phil Emery did not hire Lovie Smith. He was given Lovie Smith. Phil Emery did not trade for Jay Cutler. He was given Jay Cutler. So you have those three guys together. Bears go 10-6, but Lovie gets fired because he wasn't Phil Emery's coach. So then Phil Emery brings in Mark Trestman. Well, Mark Trestman didn't draft or sign or trade for Jay Cutler, but he gets Jay Cutler. 2014 was an absolute disaster, worse than this year, worse than any year I've ever covered. They blow the whole thing up. Everyone gets fired, but guess what? Ryan Pace, who comes in as GM, he's stuck with Jay Cutler because of the contract. So now Ryan Pace has John Fox and Jay Cutler. They have a couple years. Well, then Ryan Pace knows he needs a quarterback. Well, he doesn't necessarily fill John Fox in on this whole quarterback search, and he decides to go ahead and draft Mitch Trubisky instead of Patrick Mahomes. The Bears have Mitch Trubisky with John Fox. He's about to get fired. He's a lame duck head coach, so John Fox gets fired. Well, now Ryan Pace hires Matt Nagy. Well, guess who Matt Nagy did not draft? He did not draft Mitch Trubisky. So Chase knows this better than all of us. 2018 was a lot of fun. Mitch Trubisky had some great moments 2018. So did Chase Daniel. And then we move on to 2019. Things did not go very well. You start to see, head coach and quarterback are not working well together. And it continues to get worse. So that Matt Nagy has to go trade for Nick Foles. And then that doesn't work. And Mitch Trubisky comes back in. Then Mitch is gone. Then comes 2021. And here's an opportunity for the team to reset. But no, they kept Ryan Pace, they kept Matt Nagy, they allowed them to trade up and draft Justin Fields. So you're like, okay, well, I guess you have GM, head coach, and quarterback aligned. No, 1 year, Justin Fields' rookie season, which was very ugly for so many ways. Fire Ryan Pace, fire Matt Nagy, bring in Ryan Poles, and bring in Matt Eberflus. Well, guess who they did not draft? Justin Fields. So Justin Fields gets 2 years with those guys. He gets traded. Then here we go. GM, head coach get to draft a quarterback together. They draft Caleb Williams. It looks like it's just going to last 1 year. And whoever Ryan Poles hires, assuming like it's just the head coach or who knows what's going to happen, guess who that head coach did not draft? Who's going to take over next year if that's what they decide to do? Caleb Williams. And the cycle continues.
It really is amazing because you remember not only all these things, but every time you say something, you just feel like, man, I feel like I've said this before, because you have probably 5 or 6 times regarding the Bears. I remember that when they brought in Poles, thinking they have no allegiance to this quarterback in Justin Fields. He hasn't been playing well, and he probably will just play for a little while. They'll realize he's not it, and he's going to get his own guy. Well, guess what happens if this season continues the way that it's going? 100% the head coach is fired. I tend to think he'll make it the rest of the season, only because it just makes you look that much worse if you're just firing random people throughout the season. It looks like you don't know what you're doing. You look incompetent. You look stupid. You have one opportunity to fire and reset in the middle of the season. So, for example, if we beat the crap out of the Bears and then they fire the head coach, they are unbelievably stupid. Now, that falls within the realm of possibility because they are unbelievably stupid. But I tend to think they're going to carry it through the end of the season. Eberflus will not survive the offseason. Pending some kind of massive revival, he's done. And his defense is starting to fall apart and everything. I think he's lost the locker room. I think it's over. And like you said, so what does that mean? And that assumes Poles makes it another year, which I don't think he should, but he probably will. I don't think Poles has done anything good. But regardless, you're going to have a new regime come in, a new head coach who's going to hire all new coaches, and they're going to inherit an entire team and a quarterback that they did not have any part in bringing into this team. And if you assume Poles is out, then it's everybody from top to bottom. They're looking at Caleb, and they're going to try their best, but they don't care. They don't care about what everybody thought when they watched his tape back in the day. They don't care about how much the city really believed in this guy or whatever. They're inheriting a team, and their job is to evaluate and determine what they have and then decide what needs to go and what needs to stay. And if Poles, what's probably going to happen is they're going to hire somebody else. Poles will stay on. Next year turns around. Maybe everything is great at that point. I mean, the defense is probably going to continue to falter because they don't have that good of players. They haven't drafted very good players. The only competent players they went out and overpaid in free agency. So that's going to continue to spiral. Some of those contracts are going to have to run out. They're going to have to get rid of some of these older guys. So you're going to have an offensive-minded head coach, obviously, because that's just what you're going to have to do. Everyone's tearing you apart for drafting a defensive guy and then using that to go out and get a quarterback. So they're going to get an offensive-minded guy. Your defense is going to start to falter. Caleb probably is not really going to improve because he's Caleb and he's just really not very good. You're also going to have to get rid of some of your wide receivers. You can't get rid of DJ Moore, who is just absolutely a locker room cancer at this point because you just gave him a massive contract, but you can part ways with the 32, 33, however old he's going to be wide receiver in Keenan Allen, and that's probably what they're going to have to do. But then when the team doesn't get any better, and I'm sure Ryan Poles is going to do nothing to fix anything, then Ryan Poles ends up getting fired. So you're going to have a second-year head coach and a first-year GM going into the, third year of Caleb Williams, which will be very much like Justin Fields. It'll be his third year, and they're going to look at it and say, this is not very good, and then they're going to have an opportunity to draft a quarterback, and they probably will. And the cycle continues on and on and on and on and on. And it's funny even listening to it because, he even mentioned how it was, Pace and Nagy that that got Justin Fields, and it was for a year, and it was bad, and then they fired him. It's like, you've kind of been waiting, this fan base and everybody's been waiting for an opportunity to have some cohesion between GM, head coach, and a quarterback that they agreed on. And you gave him 1 year. Maybe it was never going to work, but maybe you should have just let them ride it out. It was their guy. It was their vision. They were the ones that had a plan for Justin Fields. Maybe just wait and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, then blow it up, but blow it all up. But no, then we go out and get brand new people, and then they have to inherit a quarterback that they didn't have a vision for, that they didn't have anything to do with, and try to build around that, and that doesn't work. It's just ridiculous. So anyways, that joke of an organization that was just described there, they fired their offensive coordinator. Here is Tom Pelissero talking about that.
Why now for Shane Waldron and the Bears to part ways, sir?
The simplest explanation, Rich, is they just weren't good enough the last couple of weeks. Obviously, you heard it from the fans, the boos being out in the first half and all that. They didn't score enough. And when you've got the expectations they have, when you've put...
By the way, these aren't answers. I mean, it's an answer. It's not a sufficient answer. Why would you fire the offensive coordinator? Not good enough. Okay. And what? Not scoring enough. Okay. And what? I didn't ask how good the offense is. I asked why specifically did you fire the offensive coordinator?
So many resources into the offense and adding personnel and adding the receivers, and you use the number 1 overall pick on Caleb Williams. The bar is set at a certain level, and they were always going to have the challenge of being able to meet that bar.
Which, by the way, is hilarious because essentially the GM, the message here, according to Tom Pelissero, is the GM obviously did a great job. Look at all the amazing things he did. And so we set the bar really high because clearly he built a juggernaut of a team, right? Elite quarterback, really good old guy at wide receiver. DJ Moore, super good. Everybody's great. Everybody's amazing. Offensive line, so good. Tight ends are all great. The running back is elite. And so despite the fact that not actually that much changed from last year when you were awful, except for a rookie quarterback and a couple new wide receivers, one of which is 50 years old. Leaving all that aside, though, obviously we're going to be elite. And so when we weren't, there's only one answer. Only one. Not 2 or 3 or 4 or 20. One, and it's the offensive coordinator, presumably.
I still go back a few weeks to the fact that they've got the Commanders beat in Washington until Tyreek Stevenson decides to wave goodbye to the crowd and then tips the ball to Noah Brown in the back of the end zone, and they lose that game. The last 2 weeks going to Arizona.
Yeah, by the way, that has nothing to do with the offense in general. It has nothing to do with the offensive coordinator. It actually had something a little bit to do with that player. More specifically, it had everything to do with the head coach who mismanaged that horrific situation. But sure, let's pretend that somehow explains or further helps us understand the situation.
Arizona, I think they scored 9 points in that game and then 3 against the Patriots. Clearly something had to change. And it was I would tell you this, Rich, it was a unique sequence of events because, Matt Eberflus goes, he says, I think on the radio yesterday morning that they're talking about changes, and then he does his press conference in the afternoon. He won't commit to Shane Waldron still being on staff as the offensive coordinator by the following week. My understanding as of last night was that the plan was going to be Waldron would stay. They potentially would move him upstairs, change some things operationally, but that he was going to remain the offensive coordinator. But Shane Waldron got called in by Matt Eberflus around 7:30 Central this morning and told that they were indeed going to make a change. They had a staff meeting at 8. Everybody found out it's going to be Thomas Brown now taking over as the offensive coordinator. It's a big opportunity for Thomas Brown, who last year, remember, he took over.
By the way, keep in mind how hilarious that is. And granted, Tom Pelissero might not be getting the best information. He may have just been getting some faulty information there. But the Bears seemingly had no idea what they were going to do. They knew they had to do something. They weren't sure what they were going to do. Sounded like they planned on initially just taking play calling duties away from him and moving him upstairs. There were also reports that actual players had been getting in contact with the organization, with the head coach, possibly with the GM, et cetera, and saying we want the offensive coordinator fired. Those are reports that have come out by certain people that have been corroborated by other people. So potentially they were swayed by their players and decided to just fire him. But again, just an organization that is just kind of flying by the seat of their pants.
Over, Frank Reich gave him play calling duties, then took him back. Then Reich got fired. Then Thomas Brown took over. Again, you got some of the same elements at play here, where you're trying to rescue.
Almost identical elements, actually. Let's. Why don't we just go ahead and skip to that, because it's a perfect segue. We may have to jump back, but that's fine. But the other side of this coin of they fired their offensive coordinator is the fact that they promoted a guy by the name of Thomas Brown. We'll get into that, but I want to start with this because he went through a little bit of his history. Here's Kyle Brandt. One of if you've been listening for a while, there's several people that for whatever reason rub me the wrong way constantly. Kyle Brandt is one of them. He makes a phenomenal point here. It's about halfway through this 2-minute video, so just be patient and listen to the whole thing.
I don't know if Thomas Brown moves into a new office today. I don't know how that works. Or if they get a new marker board or whatever. Take the dry erase marker and just start making a list of priorities, okay? Against the Packers, number 1, just keep Caleb standing by any means necessary. If you keep in 6 guys, 8 guys, 10 guys, just block for him. And if they can't block, have him get the hell out of there. You cannot get him hit. Priority number 2, get the ball to DJ Moore. Priority number 3, get the ball to Cole Kmet. Okay? Caleb Williams has shown
By the way, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. This is definitely not where he's making good points. This is stupid. This is, and I'm constantly picking on quote unquote fans. We're just kind of talking about generic people that I hear on social media all the time that think that they know what the heck they're talking about and they don't. This is stupid. Let's reiterate what he wants to do. Here's how I want you to think about this. You're the defensive coordinator. How do you stop this? The Bears are going to keep 8-ish players in, if needed, to block, and then are going to try to force feed just 2 players. If you're the defensive coordinator, does that sound like a hard thing to stop or an easy thing to stop? I don't know if you know this. There's only 11 people allowed on a team. If 8 people are blocking and 1 guy is the quarterback, that means only 2 people can go out. Now, maybe he's exaggerating, and that's fine, but the point is you want to keep extra people in, which means less people are going out. That's easier to cover. And then you want to force feed certain players. That makes it even easier to cover because all you have to do is take those players away. If all I have to do is focus on taking 1 or 2 players away and I've completely destroyed your game plan, you're stupid. So I guess that's where we're at, Kyle, but please continue.
0 chemistry with DJ Moore, even less with Cole Kmet. He's got pretty good chemistry with Keenan Allen, but he almost never throws to Kmet. And then DJ Moore, who's got that weird smirk on his face and bizarre body language, that starts to snowball throughout the game. It's pretty simple. I do have to say, and we consider like, yes, this is great.
Here we go.
Thomas Brown has an interesting background, and he was a cool player in college before he got hurt in the NFL. Let me get this straight. Last year, he was running the Panthers offense. He ran the worst offense in the league and did his role in breaking a number 1 overall pick quarterback. This year now, he is taking over the league's worst offense in a ditch attempt to save a number 1 overall pick quarterback. I'm sure he's a great guy and good energy. That's the one of all the...
Literally, of all people on planet Earth, I can't think of a worse person to put in, even if for not just the optics. The exact same thing happened last year. Like, let me reiterate what he said. Worst offense in football. The coach play caller gets fired. He is promoted, and as we'll get into in a minute, the offense gets worse, not better. And the result was Bryce Young. I mean, he was asked to do what the Bears are about to ask him to do right now, which is save the offense and help develop Bryce Young. How did that go? The offense got worse, and Bryce Young is a joke. And I feel bad for him, and he played a decent game, I think, the last time I saw him. Hopefully he can turn that around. Why in the world is this, of all people, the guy that you want? The guy that was in the exact same situation last year and completely dropped the ball and did not in any way help the failing number 1 overall pick. That's who you picked. He was in the identical situation last year and ruined it. And that's who you want to take over the responsibilities. Okay.
The coaches on staff, of all the coaches not on staff, Thomas, you do it because we were so impressed with what you did with Carolina last week that was so bad. That's the reason we even drafted Caleb, because we had their bleeping pick.
Right.
Why is he the guy? Due respect, I've never met him. Nice guy. But that's the guy. You just saw what he did with the number 1 pick in a crappy offense. Now we're going to do it differently? You want insanity definition? I give you Thomas Brown.
He's 100% correct. By the way, here is Thomas Brown. This is, according to Dave on X, NFL writer for SM, covering the Chicago Bears, co-host of BFR Pod. He says, a must-watch opening statement from the new Bears offensive coordinator, Thomas Brown.
We're saying how much I appreciate George, Kevin, Flus, and also Ryan for giving me the opportunity to lead this offense. I also want to thank Shane Waldron. Kind of gets lost in this transition of how it affects people in their families and their lives. I met Shane back in 2020, first working with the Rams, and he was phenomenal to me and my family to help onboard us coming to the NFL. And so I just want to say thank you to him. But again, it was just eyes up, moving forward, excited about the opportunity. This will not be a one-man show. I'm excited to kind of work and collaborate with our entire staff and our players to fix the problems that we do have. Had a great conversation yesterday with Caleb about my thoughts moving forward, issues to fix. And just had a phenomenal walkthrough. Guys were upbeat, moving around, being really detailed. So excited about practice. Cool.
There you go. The only defense that you can make about this move is that it buys you 1 week. Because, from what I've heard, he's very well liked. He's a very well liked guy. So it makes sense. You take out the guy that isn't very well liked, you put in the guy that is very well liked, because then the player's a little bit motivated. Guess what happens, though, if they get spanked by the Packers? Your 1 week of reprieve is over. Now, maybe that doesn't happen. We're not allowed to talk about it, but, the whole changing coaches thing, who knows? Last year, when he took over as a play caller, it was October 29th. They played the Houston Texans, a very good team. Guess what happened? They beat the Houston Texans 15-13. That's how this crap goes. I'm sorry. But to be clear, all the goodwill and everything else, it goes out the window if and when the Packers beat them. But I want to elaborate a little bit about this new offensive coordinator. First of all, under Brown's play calling, the Panthers' offense experienced a downturn. The team averaged 13.6 points per game, which was a decrease from 18.6 points per game under Frank Reich's play calling. Passing yards dropped from 221.3 to 197.6, and rushing yards decreased from 98 to 75. Critics also pointed out that his offense was predictable and conservative. All these issues led to Frank Reich reclaiming play calling duties after a brief period. So it doesn't necessarily line up with the whole firing thing. It's more or less when he took over play calling duties is when they beat the Texans, but still, whatever. I don't know, man. Bottom line is it was a disaster. And then after Reich got fired, he kind of became the kind of play caller, although it was a collaborative thing, which is what he says he's doing in Chicago. It's sort of a collaborative approach. By the way, I want to point out, we saw the Panthers in 2023, the year that he was the offensive coordinator, and that game was 30-33. The Packers won that game. I don't know if you remember, that was in the era where we played some of the worst quarterbacks in the entire NFL, and our defense looked completely stupid. Really hoping that doesn't happen again. Freaking Bryce Young had his best game ever, scoring 30 points, by far. Well, I shouldn't say by far. They scored 27 against Seattle. But for the most part, by far, the best game they've had. Since their bye week in Week 7, the most points they scored outside of Green Bay was 18. 15, 13, 13, 10, 10, 18, 6, 9, 30, and then 0-0. They didn't score a single point after us. God, Joe Barry, man, I'm sorry. Say whatever you want about the players or whatever else. That is so pathetic. But with that said, let's double back a little bit and continue to make fun of them for the fact that they had to fire an offensive coordinator mid-season. Start with this. Dan Wiederer says Shane Waldron is the 8th member of Matt Eberflus's coaching staff to be fired or resign in the past 14 months. Hilariously, maybe I have the tweet somewhere, but just in case I don't, let me just say it now. I believe the one person who has not been fired on this staff is the offensive line coach. the one coach that I think is the most hated among Bears fans. Here's what Big Cat had to say. Just a reminder, as much as Eberflus and Waldron need to go, don't celebrate too much because it's still the McCaskies owning the team. Rotten culture to the core. Until they sell the team or hire a real football guy to run everything, doubtful, nothing will ever change. This is where Big Cat and Bears fans are right now. Oh, you know where that stat came from? It's Pat McAfee.
His AP Tone's face just lit up about is because this is the 8th member of Eberflus's coaching staff that has either resigned or been fired in the last 14 months.
Oh, no.
Okay, so normally whenever you're standing in the middle of a fire, inevitably it's going to catch up.
Of course.
You know, you can kind of get the couch that's on fire, get it out of the house.
Sure.
You can get the recliner out of the house. You can get maybe the cabinets or whatever, you can get them out. But inevitably that thing is going to, you know, you can do this a lot and then it's going to at some point come this way. So I think a lot of people in Chicago are potentially expecting head coaching change at the end of this season. And if they do that, who do they go get? Is it a guy that maybe is no longer the cock of the walk at the university in which he is the head coach and knows Caleb very, very well in Lincoln Riley? Or is it a guy who has been an offensive coordinator in...
By the way, I would laugh hysterically if they went the Lincoln Riley route. Look, maybe it would work, but I just have to assume that what would happen, because the problem isn't that we don't have a coach that doesn't know how to use Caleb. The problem is the way that Lincoln Riley used Caleb, and Caleb used his skill set in college, doesn't work in the pros. So bringing in a guy that knew how to use Caleb in college has no benefit to having him acclimate to the NFL, where Lincoln Riley does not have experience. Beyond that, within 5 weeks of this thing going poorly, everybody's just going to look at this and say, I can't believe these idiots went and hired a college coach. Like, that never works, right? It's one of those things that if you look into the future with hindsight, if that makes sense, you can kind of see, like, everybody should have known this wasn't going to work. That's one of those hires where you look at it and go, yeah, everybody should have known this was stupid.
College at USC, has been a head coach in the NFL before, and is now leading a rookie quarterback to another historic season in Cliff Kingsbury. Is it Ben Johnson? Is it Slow?
Cliff Kingsbury would be hilarious as well for all the same reasons. We've seen Cliff Kingsbury. I know he's respected again, right? He was a head coach. It was a disaster. And then I believe he went back to college, and then he came back because he's a supposedly brilliant offensive mind, which I know we're going to give him all the credit in the world for Washington when really I don't think it's him as much as it's the quarterback, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Go ahead and hire him. Hire Cliff Kingsbury. I want you to.
Look, there's a lot of opportunity out there, but nonetheless, all of it kind of revolves around another offense coming in next year for Caleb Williams, 3rd and 3 years.
Yeah, because of what you said, where, you talked about, is the OC successful and then OC leaves? That's why, we love Flus, but obviously they're going to make a change.
We love Flus. I don't think Chicago does.
Yeah,
They don't like Flus.
They're sick of his beard.
And because of what you said, it has to be an offensive guy because you...
Right. That's what I was saying. It has to be an offensive guy. Anyways, this is where I saw that stat. I don't think he even said it, but the only coach still around from the beginning is the offensive line coach. Here's a tweet from Jay, or Direct Him. Says, the George McCaskey era, bear down. 12 years, 3 general managers, 4 head coaches, 10 offensive coordinators, 0 playoff wins. Soback Sports in the comments section has a picture of McCaskey's face with the text that just says, you just got George McCaskey'd. Oh, man, that should be a thing in Chicago. I hope it is. How about this one? Bears play callers since Ron Turner, 2005 to 2009. Mike Martz, Mike Tice, Mark Trestman, Adam Gase, Dowell Loggins, Matt Nagy, Bill Lazor, Matt Nagy, Bill Lazor, that was fun, he says, Luke Getsy, Shane Waldron, and now Thomas Brown. Ridiculous. Patrick Finley, covering the Bears and NFL for the Sun-Times, said, Bears coach Matt Eberflus and GM Ryan Poles flew around the country to interview 8 offensive coordinator candidates in January. Shane Waldron was the only one they brought back to Hallis Hall. Now, after 9 games, he's out. And I will say it's kind of funny because, again, we're all just assuming that this was the right decision. I mean, maybe it was, I don't know. But the idea that the guy's just terrible. I want to go back to one of the receipts here. So this is starts August 22nd. Just another year in Chicago. It says, this team is low-key hilarious. I haven't seen a Bears team with this much chemistry since 2018. And it's all the, Netflix nonsense or whatever. Of course, it's the off-season. Bears fans think this is the best thing in the world. So much chemistry. Everything's wonderful. Sunshine and rainbows. They never learn a freaking thing. And then Kristen Tanis, avid sports fan, passionate about great questions, meaningful insights, and stories that stick. Bears, Cubs, Warriors is what she says. She is a receipt machine. She just says things that are wrong all the time. She says, this can't be said enough. Imagine being Caleb, number 1 overall pick, generational talent. Not only does he come to a team with incredible set of offensive weapons, goes through the list, guided by a top 10 play caller in Waldron under a defensive head coach who builds top 10 defenses. There's a ton more in here. That's when my man KDG, official 414, comes in. He's a good follow on social media. He says, Waldron is not a top 10 play caller. To which Christian Tanis says, sure he's not, crying, laughing face. Seattle top 10 in both points scored and pass offense DVOA in 2022, was like 12th last season when Geno was hurt. The comment under that says, we call this putting someone in their place. So again, the idea that of all the people, this is who you come back with. Everybody knew that this was stupid. This is the dumbest thing in the world. Bears fans were all over this. And for good reason, because he actually didn't have a terrible offense in Seattle. There's a whole big thing I want to do that we obviously don't have time to do today, but it's just a huge list of failures. And although it's true that things have gone wrong, the overall tone from Bears fans that this incompetent organization has done things that everybody knew was wrong is stupid. And I know because I've argued with Bears fans constantly about the fact that these people are not good and they constantly fight to the death saying, yes, they are, and this is why everything's about to turn around. Anyways, just a couple more making fun of this offensive coordinator situation. Here is Emmanuel Acho.
But I'll share this. I won't share the name. I got a text while we were doing the show from a Pro Bowl player who played for the Seahawks when Shane Waldron was there. This was September 26th. I could have told you when the OC Shane Waldron had hired, the offense was going to be some bleep. Never understood that hire. I respond. They respond. Man, they hated him in Seattle, and we collectively felt like we didn't have a good offensive coaching staff. Close quote. Now, I didn't play for Shane Waldron. I didn't play in Seattle. I sure as heck didn't play in Chicago. But on September 26th on Thursday, after the Bears lost to the Colts and Caleb struggled again, I got a text from somebody who played under that Seattle brand saying, I could have told you the offense was going to be some bleep. The bleep word started with an S. So with that being said, I'm not surprised by the hire at all whatsoever. Something had to give. By the fire? By the fire. I'm not surprised at all by the fire at all whatsoever. Something had to give.
It is funny, though. And again, I'm not saying it was a good hire and Bears fans knew it or whatever. All I'm saying is the writing was on the wall. And the fact of the matter is just a tiny bit of due diligence. I mean, Emmanuel Acho's getting insights from people. You're telling me you don't have players on your team? You don't have anybody that has connections? You have nobody that can do their due diligence in Seattle and find out why Seattle does not want him anymore? I mean, you had Bears media sitting down with Jackson Smith and Jigba saying, what do you think? And he just sat there silent for about 5 seconds and then said, is this live? And then kind of, brushed it off. I'm just kidding. No, he's a nice guy. How are you this bad at your job? And it's the same thing when you look at Caleb. Didn't bother to interview anybody else. How can you be so arrogant? I mean, and that's Poles. He is the most unaccomplished, arrogant person on planet Earth. This guy has done nothing but be awful, and he's got the arrogance to walk around with all this swagger and his pop collar. He's got the arrogance to the first and one of the only things he does in free agency is go out and get a running back and throw a bunch of money at it. He has no draft picks. And instead of trading back, he gets a third wide receiver, he gets a backup tackle, and he gets a punter. The frickin' bravado of this guy is unbelievable. And then to go out and hire a guy, and you didn't bother to ask. You just thought, I can sit down and I can make the right decision. I'll know. Me and the head coach, we don't need to talk to people in Seattle. Not that, obviously the other coaching staff there would vouch for him or whatever. Maybe. I'm sure if you have good relations, for example, if Matt LaFleur was talking to McVay or Shanahan or what's his name that is currently on our staff that I can't remember for some reason. They would be honest, but that comes through building relationships, from having a successful career and having people that respect you and that you can confide in. Apparently the Bears have none of that. They don't have the ability to reach out and talk to either players or coaches or anybody to get an honest evaluation of this guy and what they thought. That, or they did find those things out and they thought they didn't care because, you know what, he's got a smart enough mind. Either way, it's unbelievable that they could find themselves in this situation where the entire Seattle Seahawks team can sit there and go, I could have told you that was going to happen. That guy's an idiot. And there's that brutal picture that Bears fans were sharing 24/7 after that loss to New England, with Shane Waldron laughing and joking with Caleb, and then looking really uncomfortable when you realize Caleb had no interest in laughing because we're getting the crap beat out of us by the Patriots, and just sat there and shook his head. Here is 670 The Score contemplating that exact issue of how in the world did this guy end up in Chicago?
How does that guy walk into the room? And we know that even if you were a Shane Waldron fan, you don't think of him as someone who necessarily like commands the room. How does he walk into that room and fool Ian Cunningham, Ryan Poles, and Matt Eberflus into hiring him?
I have a partial answer for that. Been thinking about this a lot. The McCaskies want somebody that they can push around a little bit at the very tippity top, and they get that. And then that person wants somebody that he can push around a little bit. And then that person wants somebody that he can push around a little bit. There is a vacuum of badasses in this organization. There is not a strong leader on that coaching staff at all. And Matt Eberflus, like you've said, he didn't want Cliff Kingsbury around because that's intimidation. I mean,
I would disagree with you about the entire coaching staff. I think there are a couple of badasses on that coaching staff.
Defensive coordinator?
And defensive backs coach.
Okay, that's
okay,
fine, but certainly nobody on the offensive side. We'll see. The way that the players are
certainly not the head coach, by the way.
Talking about Thomas Brown.
Maybe we'll find out that's the guy that and Richard Hightower, I would also consider a badass. So
Matt Eberflus, though, chose a very weak leader of a human being, without a doubt. And he also schematically had a whole bunch of issues, but a bad communicator who can't command a room, who doesn't threaten Matt Eberflus, the defensive head coach, that has to be a factor in how you end up with this guy. Not the only thing, but it's got to be a factor.
Let's say that personality is an issue that for them. Like I don't know if I want to go so far to say that Ryan Poles is weak. I don't buy that either, or Ian Cunningham. But
Ryan Poles is the whole thing is a fake bravado. You can hear it when he talks.
Do wonder on if you say you want like a softer guy at that spot.
And what I mean, I don't think Ryan Poles is weak necessarily, but he's not going to hire a head coach who's stronger than him. He's a little intimidated by that. And Brad Holmes wasn't intimidated by that.
Not
in Detroit.
One bit.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of that whole entire theory, let me find this real quick. I got it over here somewheres. The issue of him being maybe not the strongest leader and whatnot. I don't know. Maybe I closed it on accident. That did come up. And I think it was DJ Moore. I can't remember, but somebody was asked about Waldron and essentially just said he thinks he was too nice of a guy. He just let stuff slide. You know, you got to have the ability to smack some of these guys in the mouth and say, you're not doing that. And he didn't have that. Guy starts slacking off and he would let it go. And I don't think it's just the offensive coordinator. I mean, obviously they're not just going to come out and be like, yeah, the offensive coordinator, also this head coach idiot is the same way. But I think it is. Oh, it's right here. This is Dan Wiederer again. I asked Keenan Allen why things didn't work with Shane Waldron here at Hallis Hall, so it was Keenan. He said, I would say just probably he was too nice of a guy. I think during OTAs, training camp, he kind of fell into the trap of letting things go, not holding people accountable. Obviously, those things lead to a slippery slope. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. I can keep going. We haven't even got to the quarterback yet, so we'll save that, I guess, for tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll have time. That should be tomorrow. We're going to rip in hard to the quarterback, but we'll see. But I'm going to leave you guys with that. We will talk tonight, tomorrow, whatever. We don't have enough calls yet for Packernet After Dark, so hopefully tonight. I know last night we're not. Tonight, hopefully we have enough. But make sure you get your calls in 608-501-0718. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.